So, hello and welcome. And something I was noticing last night, it's interesting to look at sometimes. Say you're in a social situation and everyone leaves, or you go home, or whatever it is, and you suddenly have a moment to yourself. What is the first place your mind wants to go? Does it pick up the phone? Does it want a distraction? Does it want whatever? TV? It's interesting to notice this because these are often the predominant patterns of the mind. If I'm suddenly by myself and I pick up my phone, what is my mind looking for in the phone, right? Maybe some affirmation in some kind of a way through social media or something. So these are like patterns of the mind. And today, what I want to talk about a little bit is mindfulness of the mind itself. Because these patterns often can be unconscious, and some of them may be helpful and beneficial, and some of them actually may be not leading to our own health and well being, but might just be unconscious drives that are continually turning the mind towards things which don't actually provide it with well being and with relief. So, mindfulness of the mind, what we're talking about is not necessarily the thoughts themselves, although that can be part of it, noticing when the mind is thinking, but actually the quality of the mind itself, quality of the awareness. So, is the mind in any moment wrapped up in either greed, craving things, aversion, ill will towards things, or delusion, the endless spinning patterns of the mind and believing that they're true? And so this first one, greed or craving, this is can be a number of things on a range of a spectrum from, you know, craving physical pleasures, sensations, food, whatever it may be, to also craving to be someone, craving I want to be this person that I'm not right now. That's another form of craving. This is something that's very common for me actually, is continually there's this background sense of I'm not this person that I would like to be, that is somehow better than I am right now, and that if I just work hard enough I can become that person. These are like patterns of my own mind that I notice. And then the second one, this aversion or ill will, can be as strong as something like hatred. This is something very common, at least in American society, hatred for other people, people who are unfamiliar. And it can be more subtle in terms of things like kind of like a blanket ill will towards my experience. This is something that's pretty common for me, I notice, that suddenly there can just be this flavor of distaste for what is happening in my day. It's weird. It can just kind of set in and just like suddenly everything's bothering me. It doesn't matter what it is. This, I'm not doing this right. I'm a failure. This person is bothering me. And it's taken me time and time and again to notice that, like, it's not really true. It's often a wave that comes on. This is aversion, ill will. And for me, this can often lead to feelings of depression because it can feel very real. Everything sucks right now. And delusion is often, the third one, is often related to both of these, both to craving and greed and also to aversion. But it's basically, yeah, believing in, at the very essence of it, that I am separate from everything else. And this continual spinning of the mind, these patterns of mind, that in mindfulness we call as the self, the ego, whatever you want to call it, believing them to be true. So this is one of the most fundamental delusions that we can have. So I guess the last thing I'll say before we'll sit for a few minutes is that spend so much time. I found that in my own experience, there's so much time and energy in my life paying attention to the objects of the mind, paying attention to the thing I want, the new guitar, whatever it is, or like I was saying earlier, the person that I want to become, or the thing that I don't want in my life. And there's so little time spent on this quality of mind itself, the awareness. So a huge part of mindfulness practice is actually continually returning from the objects, being caught in the concepts, in the content of the thoughts, and returning to the awareness itself. So, just taking a moment wherever you're sitting, and just taking just a balanced and upright posture that feels comfortable. Just letting the body breathe itself. This natural rhythm of the breath. And if it feels comfortable, you can close your eyes, or you can just keep them open in a soft gaze. Beginning to soften the body with each out breath. Just noticing any tension in the face or the forehead. Just relaxing the muscles of the face with each out breath. Allowing that gentle rhythm of the body breathing to steady the mind down through the neck and the shoulders, the back upright, softening the shoulders, softening the chest, and in any way possible down through the stomach, the belly, and feeling into your sit bones, connecting with the chair or the cushion beneath you. And softening down through the legs, into the feet, this lower half of the body, which the mind sometimes doesn't even notice. The root, which connects us to the earth. And just noticing when the mind is thinking. Just coming back to the sense of the body breathing all on its own. Letting the mind rest on the body. And taking a moment to just become aware from the center of the chest. Just taking a second to allow the awareness to rest there. And from that place, beginning to notice this quality of mind itself. The awareness which is aware of the breath. The awareness which is aware of the thoughts. The heart mind. From that place, beginning to settle into this awareness, just noticing what's happening in the mind. If there's thinking happening, you can just use a gentle note of thinking. Allowing this awareness to be supported by the body and the breath. Noticing this quality of mind. Is there a subtle craving for anything outside of what this present moment is offering? This is not a problem. In mindfulness, we're just noticing this, becoming aware of these patterns of the mind. Gently returning to awareness and the body breathing. Is there aversion or ill will in the mind? Is the mind pushing something away or not wanting something to be an experience? Just noticing that and returning to awareness and the body breathing. Beginning to notice any thinking, the way the thoughts just seem to spin themselves sometimes. Not a problem. Just noticing the mind is thinking right now. Sometimes seemingly all on its own. And just returning to awareness. The rhythm of the breath. And the body. And for this last minute or two, just noticing this feeling of resting in the awareness itself. Just being relaxed, yet alert. What is your experience right now of being aware? Being mindful in your present experience. So thank you for taking the time to sit. And this mind that we talk about in mindfulness and in meditation, often I think the common conception of the mind is the thoughts itself or the brain itself, possibly. But in meditation, we're often referring to the heart mind. So this is awareness itself, which includes, sure, the conceptual element of the mind, and also the emotive part of the mind and the body itself. We know this now. The human nervous system is not just related to the head, it's all the way down and wired through the entire body. So in turning towards mindfulness of the mind, it's turning towards this subjective experience, awareness, and noticing the quality of it. And before I came to a meditation practice, most of my time, if not all of it, was spent on the contents of the mind. What I was trying to do, what I was trying to create, who I wanted to be, what I didn't want in my life, what this person is doing wrong. This is a big part of ongoing experience for most human beings, right? Contents of the mind. And so in meditation practice, there's this shift of actually turning towards the subjective experience itself, because these conditions around me don't provide much stability from the mind. Maybe I get what I want sometimes, definitely not all the times. There's a continual, it's very tumultuous if my well-being is rested on the contents of the mind. But in turning towards the awareness itself, there can be a steadiness or a balance. Returning to just being aware. There can be some clinging there. There can be some aversion there. The mind could be lost. But in turning and shifting towards the awareness itself, suddenly the mind isn't caught in the content. And this can begin to open up like a doorway to subjective experience, to the mind, to awareness itself. And over time, what can happen is continually shifting from, okay, I'm going through my day, contents, I'm lost in that, taking a moment to just come back. This is just thinking. The mind is just thinking right now, is what it is, and coming back over and over again, especially in seated meditation. This mechanism of shifting the mind from the content to just being aware of it begins to become more and more natural. The mind can begin to have a little more balance, where it's not always pushing, pulling, wanting to be, and there's a little bit of stability. And in that stability, there's a little bit of space begins to open up in awareness. The mind isn't constantly caught, pushed, pulled around by whatever is happening around or whatever the thoughts are trying to spin. And there's this space that begins to open up. And that can be really supportive over time, because the awareness starts to notice, actually, it feels pretty good to just chill, to just be aware, to not be constantly wrapped up in who or what I am or what everything else is and why it should be different. So continually shifting back to this awareness, there's a space. And then I get caught, and then I return to the awareness. And over time, especially over years, through doing this kind of practice, there's something really beautiful begins to open up. Through continually returning to the mind, the space becomes more and more, as opposed to the mind being more often caught in content, in the thoughts, in the self or the ego. The mind starts to shift more towards just resting in the awareness. And in that space that opens up, there starts to be more clarity. Through continually coming back, having a balanced approach and just being aware and observing, there starts to become more clarity, because the mind isn't so caught up in the contents. And from that space, I can actually begin to see the patterns of my own mind. Oh, my mind is constantly restless in this background way of trying to get something else, of trying to be somebody else, of not wanting to feel this certain way. And through starting to recognize these patterns of the mind can start to let go of the patterns which are harmful and start to notice actually what patterns of the mind are supportive for practice, supportive in life as a whole. You know, it's not like we have to completely stop thinking or doing anything, but notice patience. Feels better to be patient and not pushing and wanting things to be different. Being compassionate to someone else, listening to a good friend, you know, and this clarity over time has an onward leading nature in that the more the mind starts to recognize that being aware itself is more supportive than being lost in the content, this mechanism begins to become more and more natural, and that leads to more and more clarity and less being caught in the patterns of the mind. So this is really some of the foundation and really what's at the heart of mindfulness practice. So I just encourage you over this next week, throughout your days, to just begin to notice when the mind is caught in certain patterns. And it can be helpful to begin to notice, what are my particular patterns that I get caught in? And I think that mindfulness and meditation practice can be really supportive from freeing oneself from those patterns that are afflictive, that are harmful, from craving, greed, from aversion, ill will, pushing away, and from the delusion, from the endless spinning of the thoughts of the ego. So this is what I have to offer today, and I hope it's of benefit. And thank you for taking the time to sit with me.